when we get to it. But today, we are going to start, as we normally do, with the NFL free agency grades. We are almost there, ladies and gentlemen. We are covering the NFC West today, and then we're going to finish off the segments with the NFC North the next show. And as per tradition, recent history, we're going to go in mostly alphabetical order and give the grade before we go into the spiel about what these teams did during the offseason to receive these grades. And we are starting with the Arizona Cardinals today. The Cardinals get a B+, and a special connotation. The Cardinals are this year's recipient of the retirement home team for the 2021 NFL free agency. Before free agency really began, the Cardinals surprised everybody by acquiring J.J. Watt, which by himself is a top 10 pass rusher in the league when healthy, and across from Chandler Jones. The Cardinals should ideally have one of the best pass rushes in the NFL this upcoming season. Again, Watt is over 30. A lot of the signings for the Cardinals this year are a lot of experienced veteran players. Again, they get the retirement home award for this 2021 NFL free agency so far. The Cardinals, in addition to Watt, also signed Marcus Golden, who is another good rotational outside linebacker in that pass rush. The Arizona Cardinals defense is going to be really good next year. Another signing, AJ Green. He's another underrated signing. He had a horrible year last year, a dismal year. I think he only caught 50% of his passes, either contested or uncontested. I remember seeing that stat somewhere. He's had a dismal season in Cincinnati. Most of his career has been thrown away by the Bengals, and I think a change of scenery is really going to help AJ Green. I think behind Hopkins and Fitzgerald, if Fitzgerald decides to come back, and Christian Kirk and Isabella, there is a good foundation there at wide receiver for Arizona for AJ Green to slide right into. I think it's a great signing. The Cardinals also traded for Rodney Hudson, who had a bad year last year as well, but he has graded extremely high in prior years as a center. So if last year was the floor, he's got a tremendous ceiling, and that offensive line, in addition to them re-signing Kelvin Beachum, is going to be much improved. So not only has the defensive line improved, but the offensive line has improved for Arizona as well. And the last really big signing that the Cardinals made was signing Malcolm Butler to replace a departing Patrick Peterson, who sucks. Patrick Peterson has been a staple of that Arizona Cardinal defense for years and years and years. Malcolm Butler is a pretty good replacement, if you ask me. Again, most of these signings are on the older side. They do get the retirement home award for this offseason, but the Arizona Cardinals, for the most part, I've enjoyed their signings. I think they've made smart moves. I think they've become a better football team. And if Kyler Murray can really take that next step in his development this offseason, the Cardinals could potentially be a wildcard team this upcoming season. The Cardinals get a B+. Moving on to the Los Angeles Rams, who get a B-. Now, the Rams are obviously big spenders. They've always been big spenders, especially when it comes to trading and signing people to massive contracts. That's who the Rams have been in recent memory. And this year, they spent most of the space that they had signing Leonard Floyd to a 4-year, $64 million contract. Now, Floyd by himself isn't really worth $16 million a year. I don't think that he is, but kind of like how Bud Dupree got a huge payday from the Tennessee Titans, it definitely matters who you end up playing with. And Leonard Floyd ends up playing with and lining just off of Aaron Donald, who is a 3 or 4-time defensive player of the year. He is the best defensive tackle in football, potentially the best defensive player in football, depending on who you ask. And if you can get Leonard Floyd to be productive behind Aaron Donald, that price point, although expensive, is going to be mostly worth it. So I think the Rams could have gotten him for cheaper, which is why I'm not grading this signing much higher than a lot of people would, but it's still a good signing. The Rams did lose 2 of their best defensive backs, however, in free agency to Cleveland, John Johnson III and Troy Hill. And that's going to hurt them over the top, but that defense should continue to be strong, especially up front. And the Rams also signed Deshaun Jackson, so that is a nice deep threat for new Rams QB Matthew Stafford, which is the quote-unquote biggest addition to the Rams during this offseason. Whether or not you count that as part of free agency, that's up to you. As I said, when it happened, Stafford is expensive. I think they overpaid for him, but he can very well bring the Rams back into Super Bowl contention. The Rams get a B- for some expensive signings, but ones that are probably going to be beneficial moving forward, and they're going to have to continue to wiggle in and out of cap hell with voidable years, converting salary into bonus, yada yada, all the nits and needles that NFL teams use to stay under the salary cap. Moving on to the Seattle Seahawks, a lot has been made of the Seattle Seahawks offseason based on the Russell Wilson comments that came out a couple months ago, and everything sent the media into, Russell Wilson's going to be traded, that whole spree. The Seahawks went out and got the one thing that Russell Wilson was asking for, and that was some offensive line help. They traded for Raiders guard Gabe Jackson, who should be a really big improvement to that offensive line, and he will definitely improve the running links for Chris Carson, who the Seahawks also re-signed. I didn't put down the exact number in my notes, but it was a decently substantial contract, and I was a bit surprised that the Seahawks did sign Chris Carson, not because he's not a good player. I think he's a great running back. There's no doubt in my mind, but the Seahawks have been drafting a lot of running backs recently, Dallas out of Miami, for instance, so they theoretically could have moved on and saved a lot of money and put more money into the offensive line and repairing the defense. So I like Carson as a player, and it's a good signing on paper, but I think when you take price point and who you have available behind him, I think the Seahawks probably could have moved on from Chris Carson in some capacity and helped elsewhere. So again, not the player, it's really just the signing and the decision making. I don't know if the Seahawks made the right decision in signing Chris Carson over getting help elsewhere. Additionally, the Seahawks signed Rams tight end Gerald Everett, who should be an okay tight end for the Seahawks, who really haven't had a good tight end since Jimmy Graham. I mean, Greg Olsen really wasn't much of a help last year for Seattle. The Seahawks did get much worse on defense, though. As I already said, they let go of Shaquille Griffin, who was their best defensive back. In a year in which the defensive backs really struggled, Jamal Adams came in and he helped, but it was a very inconsistent year for Seattle in the secondary, and they lost one of their two best players back there. The Seahawks signed Akella Witherspoon to try and stop the bleeding in that aspect. He's going to be a decent replacement, nothing too crazy. Seattle also signed Kerry Hyder from the 49ers, who will be a good pass rush addition to Seattle. And other than that, Seattle spent a lot of time re-signing a lot of their own players, Tyler Lockett, Carlos Dunlap, to name a few. The defensive backcourt is going to be a bit of a problem for Seattle moving forward, but they did a pretty good job of re-signing the players that they needed to and improving the offensive line, which does give them a more positive grade than an average grade. Again, the Seahawks get a B-. Moving on to the last team, which is the 49ers. I know all the conversation around San Francisco right now is who they're going to be taking in the number 3 draft selection, but as far as the San Francisco offseason is concerned, it was mostly very solid. Talking about how they spent, talking about how much they spent to move up in the draft, putting that out of the equation. The 49ers re-signed Trent Williams to a massive 6-year contract, and although the numbers look gigantic on that, it has the potential to be a very team-friendly deal moving forward. And although expensive, it's going to really pay off, especially with the signing of Alex Mack, a center from Atlanta, who's going to reunite with Kyle Shanahan. That offensive line is going to be the best offensive line in the league next year if they all stay healthy. You have the number 1 and number 2 Power Football Focus ranking for offensive linemen, I believe from last season, in addition to Alex Mack joining. So it's Alex Mack, McClinchy, and Williams all on that offensive line. The run is going to be very hard to stop in San Francisco if they all stay healthy. Additionally, the 49ers signed 2 important defensive back to prove it deals. Jaquiski Tart and Jason Verrett signed for cheap 1-year deals, allowing the 49ers to upgrade elsewhere. And some of those small signings were like Mohamed Sanu, Ronald Blair, really added depth to the 49ers, who had interesting depth already. They were completely ravaged by injuries last year, and you really saw that depth come onto display. And now they've added even more depth. The 49ers had a really good offseason, a really good free agency, and if they get the right quarterback in the draft, do not be surprised if they're in the Super Bowl next season. The 49ers get a solid B rating for their free agency offseason, and that is the NFC West free agency grades. Again, we're going to finish with the final division being the NFC North, and that is going to be during the next show, whenever that will be. So if your team is in the NFC North, you've been waiting for a long time, they're coming next, and then we'll wrap everything up. We'll get a playlist going, and everything will be together. So did you think that I got these grades right? Comment down below. If I missed something, let me know. Hey folks, thank you so much for listening to this segment from the Hard-Headed Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed this segment, make sure that you drop a like on the video and a comment. It helps me out a bunch. And if you're interested in watching more segments like this from the show after the show has been completed, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel and And if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should listen to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Once again, thank you so much for watching the video. My name is Nick Ryan, and I will see you all again very soon.